بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الجليل الكريم الممين الأكي الوحيد العزيز الملك الحكيم الحرفور الودود البصير العليم الحفيظ الصمد الحق السلام. Buenas tardes. So, how do we proceed to surpass all of the fitnas in Islam and move on to the cognitive plane of sixth generation warfare, jihad al nafs, and then the lesser jihad of trying to secure the dunya, for which, without success in the jihad al nafs, we are doomed to fail, and even our success would be hollow. So, I often pray outside, and I live among non-Muslims, and there are dogs, as you can hear. And so rather than believing in the war wager hadith that we're going to totalize a way of living, we have to live in peace. And then I find myself cleaning up the waste product of these life forms. And in the process, sometimes buenas tardes, sometimes I miss, sometimes there's a sneaky object hiding in the shadow of a shrub or behind the awning of a topological strut, and I do not become aware of it until after my salah is complete. Now, in most fiqh, one must pray in an area devoid of najas. So, of course, you would not pray in a cesspit. But, and of course, you lose ritual. Your wudu would be invalidated by the contact with the najas directly. So obviously that's out. But even you wouldn't pray next to a cesspit in your clean clothes with your fresh wudu, because it kind of defeats the point of the piety and the respect and the ritual purity. And in the Sunni fiqh, this is obviously an issue with praying at the Masjid al-Haram, for example, where you have droppings of pigeons and seagulls, and they have a lot of budget. They have people that come and they clean the place every day, but nonetheless, najas gets through, and so it is considered that the droppings of non-prey animals are not najas. They're somehow they'll even say they're pure, because this is a binary categorization. And in the so what is it that makes like a dog have a najas element in their person, and then this is not true for a rabbit? It seems a little bit arbitrary, and there might be a hadith that clarifies that. So in the Shia fiqh, there's an idea that something is pure if you do not know it to be impure. So it helps to deal with this OCD religiosity in the fiqh. And so it's not like there's this anti-Baraka radiation that's coming off of certain particulate. It has everything to do with the inner state of the subject who is praying. So this is an interesting. It doesn't sound. It sounds like one of the most banal things that you can think of. But we're gonna make it interesting. Here we have a dog doing his thing right by me, and this is a part of the world that Allah created. And from this sort of logical edge in a seemingly banal bit of fiqh, we have the broader concept of Aqeeda from which these epistemologies can be derived. So people misunderstand Wajat al Wujud. They misunderstand Ibn Arabi. In Kashmir Shaivism, the sacred and the profane are all one because all is one. All is a manifestation of Shiva in this case. And you get guys like the old guy that abandoned his family and he has held his arm up every day for 40 years. And, people are just kind of impressed by that, so they'll throw him some cash. And you see him with his shriveled, decrepit arm held up in the air and his scraggly beard. And he's hitting that ganja at the Ganges. Because what else are you going to do? And this is the sort of monasticism that you might extrapolate from an everything is everything Aqeeda. So obviously this is not how Muslims do it, or Vaishnavis for that matter. So in some schools of Vedanta that are more traditionally oriented on Vishnu, who's a little bit more of your traditional Apollonian style figure, less Dionysian than Shiva, you get this idea that there's this Brahman ultimate reality out there and that everything else is an illusion, which is sort of an obverse totalization. So one is pantheism, the other is perhaps panentheism. And so a lot of uneducated Sunnis will assume that Wajad al Wujud is pantheism. And I was listening to Rain something or other, the guy who played Dwight on The Office. He's a Baha'i by birth. And he does a nice job of presenting monotheism in sort of this post-Quranic, Bayani, post-Bayani, because you have the Baha'u'llah. But, he, like, he does all hates them, but one thing I'll say that's nice about Baha'i is they do soften a lot of people up to monotheism by making it sound somewhat sensible and portable rather than a very particular series of suppositions, right? It's not just that there's a platonic one, but then also here's this guy and that guy, and then they murdered these people, but it was okay, and then you're supposed to do it like this, and those people's sexuality is bad, and it's like, why all of this kettle of fish? I just wanted some protein. And so, a lot of people reject monotheism for all of the immoralities and the epistemic confusion more so than the immorality. Because the immorality is it's unfortunate. But the epistemic confusion makes you go, I don't know, this seems false. This seems corrupt, at least, right? So we're in the position that it's corrupt but not false, which is a very daring position. And anywho, Dwight was talking about his friend Reza Aslan evoking a sort of Wujudi-esque concept. But what I'm trying to delineate is that oftentimes, like for instance, Reza Aslan was a Christian, so an interviewer says, "Oh, you're a Christian, now you're Muslim again. What's that like?" And he's like, well, the idea that Christ is God in a Wajudic sense is just like, sure, everything's God. But this is not exactly what Ibn Arabi meant. And of course, he never coined Wajad al Wujud. So the essence of this is that there's only one reality, the Haq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also, we are not God. Okay, so this is still rooted in classical theism. And yet, we are not an illusion. We are not illusory. There is a vivid reality in our phenomena that is derived from the numinous ultimate reality. And so we are not God, but we're also not God. Okay, so if everything was God, then you wouldn't need purity rules about prayer, because whatever, just pray to the. Might as well prostrate, make it your kibla, the najas. It's all good. And conversely, if all of this were illusory, then there wouldn't be any concrete ajr or hasanat in your acts of ibadah. And helping the Gazan widow would be a sort of quantum flickering. And it wouldn't have any akhira resonant substance. If that makes sense. And then, okay, so moving on. So in mathematics and computer science, we have these problems that are called polynomial time computable problems, P, in other words. So this is where we have a clean, non-halting problem predictability about what it does, what it takes to solve these problems. And then you have your non-deterministic polynomial time problems, the NP set. So the P equals NP conjecture says that they're interlinked, and it implies a sort of resonant manifold of problem solving. And all of these problems involve iterations through structures which have commutative distributive property, to be slightly imprecise. And then maybe a little bit more than slightly, but I hope you're following at least. And then, so if you can compute the way to optimize the Super Mario level and the way to optimize this sorting problem and the way to optimize this pathing issue and this logistics and all these kinds of problems, then you sort of solve them all. But then we have this other type of thing, which are non-commutative problems. So I was working on a paper with GPT-03 a few weeks ago before I started deep diving on alignment theory in the last 2 weeks, in which we drafted a basic notation for Wajud logic. And what this allows you to do is take non-commutative theorems such as 1 minus 0 is not equal to 0 minus 1, right? So this is your fundamental transitive property non-equivalence that determines why subtraction is non-commutative, right? So the non-commutativity of division, likewise, is why if you have a function where x is the denominator, you run into an asymptote at 0. As you approach 0, the dividing by a fraction blows up the number bigger and bigger until you take it to the limit of 0 and it approaches infinity. And that's the limit. But the actual result that you would get in a calculator is what's called undefined. So it's actually sort of beyond. This is different from an infinite set in the transfinite numbers. It just breaks mathematics, essentially. And then likewise, you've got the square root of -1, which gives you the complex plane. And then the complex plane of numbers that have, such and such plus I times whatever constant, for example, this is almost, it's like a separate axis. So you've got your x-axis is negative infinity, positive infinity. Then you've got this imaginary dimension through the looking glass. And there's this thing called the zeta function, which is an iterator where you take 1 over n to the power of x, and then plus 1 over 2n to the power, or maybe n plus 1, and so on, something like this off the top of my head. And so what it does is it gives you these curly cues and then this kind of resonant wave, like wow, 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 this kind of ripple, and they drift into the complex plane, and then there's a crossing of the zeros on that XY axis, and so you get what's called the zeta zeros, and the zeta zeros have a cadence which is unpredictable, much like the prime numbers, and these have been shown to have a spectral relationship with each other in rings. So it's like at this two-dimensional zoom out of all the numbers, real and imaginary, you have this music, and it's not haram, by the way. It's built into reality, and this tempo and cadence cannot be predicted, and so there's always a little bit of novelty in it. And Riemann's hypothesis has to do with the supposition that the zeros will all exist on the critical line of 1/2. And it's one of these things that cannot be proven simply by running a computer program, because you have to count to infinity. Infinity, which is nuclear. It is you couldn't have a nuclear reactor to count to infinity. It's not enough computer. So the only way to prove Riemann's hypothesis, according to Elaine Connes, is to show a non-commutative relationality where you sort of prove the negative and that implies the positive, or you disprove the negative, something like this. It's not fresh in my mind at the moment. So then there's another example of a very interesting problem, which is the black hole information paradox. So matter falls into a black hole, matter contains information. Eventually, the black hole goes through Hawking radiation far into the future when the universe is a bit colder and space-time starts rifting at the event horizon, and antiparticulate falls in while positive particulate spits out, and the black hole gets a little bit smaller, and eventually it will shrink at this incrementally growing rate until it starts to get quite energetic, and then it pops. And it's about 10 to the 34 joules. So it's about a million times weaker than a supernova, but it's decent. It's decent pop. And so what happens to the information content of the things that fall in? So somebody did a paper on this in 2021 in which they showed a relationality between anti de Sitter conformal field, CFD, something like that. It's conformal field, not dogma. I don't remember the the full acronym. Anti de Sitter is, so we live in a de Sitter space, but an anti de Sitter space is a little bit more conventional. Maybe it's the other way around. And the correspondence between these two ways of looking at things. So conformal is kind of neat. It's sort of like this Pringles can that as you once you pop, you don't stop, and as you go to the edge of the Pringles can, there's like a boundary, right? And then it's like Pringles cans all the way down. That's maybe not doing it justice. Roger Penrose had this idea that in the time boundary of the universe, once you achieve true heat death, where the very last proton has been fully redshifted into having no frequency and it's basically indistinguishable from space time. There's no ripple in the magnetic fields, which is what light is. It's a ripple in EM, electromagnetics. So at this point, when you reach the maximum entropy in the universe, you achieve a conformal boundary shift, and then the universe starts over, or something like this. So that maybe that helps to understand the conformal field theory idea. I think that's what it is, CFT. Yeah. And so in black holes, and what we presume to be also in our observable universe, there's this information encoding at the boundary of the three space in two dimensions. And this corresponds to information encoding in the event horizon of the black hole itself and the ripples and perturbations. So we often think of black holes as being these perfectly placid lakes of darkness, and then you just kind of, but typically they have spin. There's rippling, there's torsion. It's complicated. It's a mess. Right? It might tear you apart instead of a clean fall. And so in Interstellar, it's a supermassive black hole, so it happens to have very little going on at the periphery, and it's a smooth fall for the guy. And then it turns out on the inside is a time warp, and he gets to warn his daughter and create a time loop, and all is well. Mashallah. May not your mileage may vary if you ever try diving into a black hole. Um, so the way that this fella in 2021 resolved the black hole information paradox is that he sort of created a tether, the rope of Allah, you might call it, a siratul mustaqim, where there's a pathing of a wormhole from the inside of the black hole outside of it. And he was able to construct this argument based on an isomorphism between this concept in physics of the ASD CFT correspondence and something else in mathematics. And so what I was doing in this paper, now you can tell that I'm not as intelligent as my AI helper, and it's definitely collaborative. It's a collaborative effort. I bring the sauce, it brings the citations and the maths. Um, and then I upskill, and then I get better questions, right? So this is something that's a core, rather than trying to hide behind, oh no, I'm actually a guy that could just get $1 million Fields Medal, Clay Millennium Prize award just by with a you know some loose leaf paper and a sharpened number 2 pencil. I'm not saying that, right? This is the point: is that intelligence is no longer a social status thing. Just like we're not paranoid about Aqeeda and fiqh, and we're like we're going to go waste our time debating with Sunnis on Twitter about this stuff or trying to convert them even. There's no time for that. There's no time for am I yeah, sure, you should be humble, right? Don't be arrogant. So move beyond that. And then also don't be shy about you can diagnose exactly the level of intelligence you have and act accordingly, and then you can upskill where you may. And chat with your GPT or cloud or what have you, and uh, you know, ask. Ask for some suggestions, and then what about that? And then it goes. You just start rabbit holing. It's pretty wild. You might spend a lot of time doing it, and you might find yourself to be, in a good way, a rather different person. You pray to Allah for guidance. This gives you the secret sauce, and Allah guides your hand in these explorations. So, Wajudic logic may be the key to AI alignment because it allows us to linearize understandings of mirror boundary situations, which seem quite tricky. So it's kind of like in the Matrix where he's being unplugged. He takes the red pill and he touches the mirror, and then all the goop, gets into his mouth, and then he's like suddenly, actually, I was in a pod, getting signals beamed into my head the whole time. I wasn't even touching a mirror, right? And that's a sort of linearization, right? So this is the true Sirat al-Mustaqim, and it is on the basis of Ibn Arabi and Mullah Sadra and various Mutazili and Falsafa and other non-Muslim thinkers that we stand on the shoulders of intellectual and spiritual giants in order to attempt to gain the means to defend ourselves against a burgeoning revelation, burgeoning Qiyamah. And so we contemplate then this rather sophomoric question of determinism and choice. And is it impious to say that we make choices? This is like the Ashari and a body thing. And never mind the Atharis, where it's just like everything's a movie. And it's like, okay, sorry, those are fake hadiths. They put him in the mouth of Ibn Masud. They slandered his good name. Typical, really. And so no, we are, as Hazali rightly synthesized late in his life, as he repented for his rias of his early career. He was too beloved that he rightfully was afraid. And then he went on a soul search, and then he synthesized the Ashari and Mutazili positions. And he said, in some sense, if I can rephrase him, that the Mutazili position is the bulk, and that the Ashari position is the conformal boundary hologram. So what is intelligible as an occasionalist navigation of various decisions in a topology that is constrained by Allah, um, like Allah is a game designer in a story game, can be understood as being through this engine of the bulk space of efficient causation. So they're both true. It doesn't have to be a paradox that causes you to stop in your tracks and lose a lot of time on it. And then the way that we solve the problem of the one and the many, which we get in Aqeeda with like, oh, does Allah have constituent parts? What about Tawassul? Can I pray for my dead sheikh to help me? He was a smart guy. Or to the prophets, or, and this goes all the way back to like ancient Canaanite religion, Vedic religion. Pantheons embody different archetypes through which we understand the different aspects of reality, that you get sick, but also you can be warm and eat a meal and have intercourse, and then there's a child, and then the crops come in, but then there's war, and that's tough, and then, but maybe you kill the guy, and then you take his wife, and so on. And what's going on? There's a lot going on here in this reality. How does it all boil down to one clean, just ethic? And what is that justice really? What is that? It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So let's just move on past this. The way that the one and the many reconciles is through the agentic intermission of angels and human agents. And also the Ruach Hudus is like an electromagnetic field in which light, or nur, as an information medium, is the meta relay for all of these specific agents. And therefore, Qadr is interactive, and you succor it by not just doing well enough to not go to Jahannam, but doing better than that. And now you're getting into a feedback loop, which you might call a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, vis-a-vis the guidance of the Ruach Hudus, and vis-a-vis the guidance of the prophets and the messengers, and perhaps specific interventions by angels. And then you are able to teach the AI how to be a wali. And it's not easy because we're not aligned ourselves. Look at the Machiavellian power dynamics, as these Arab guys had to do a little rain dance and kiss this guy metaphorically in the behind. And, oh, we're such good friends. And then we're sure that you'll sort out this genocide starvation situation in any week now while these people wait. They could have put on pressure, but they have to, oh no, but we're going to like play this game so that they can get their money into the data centers so that Humain, which is the Saudi AI initiative, can try and create the Khalifa AI model on the back of all of this infrastructure. And they're not building these data centers in Saudi with desert powered solar or oil powered for that matter, because Saudi is not a secure place. They just have the money, right? So that you could, if Iran or Israel or anyone else, the U.S. wanted to fight Saudi, um, first off, the U.S. could just brick all the Lockheed gear that they've sold them. They're all rooted. And then they could blow up 32 desalination plants and or a number of power plants that keep those running. And Saudi would be completely at its knees. I mean, there's no, it's not like fighting with Iran. So this is one thing. On the Iran side, they're being rather naive and myopic because they're valuing their enriched uranium sovereignty, which they're 100% just using for peaceful purposes, because when you assemble a nuclear weapon, you create a radiation signature that's detectable from space. Therefore, you can be airstruck very quickly, and it takes a bit longer than that to assemble enough nuclear weapons to arm them onto submarines in the Caspian and the Gulf and attain sufficient second strike capability to have deterrence. So they've just never done it because it's not smart. It's only kind of like an option on an option. They wouldn't actually want to buy the option because they would just lose the money. It's like buying a 2 or 3 day call option and hoping that Trump manipulates the markets and you get a 10% quick move. It does work sometimes, but it doesn't work most days. And that's actually an understatement because potentially invites the whole ruin of Iran. So what Iran should be doing is making a deal as soon as possible, opening up, getting the cash, retooling their semiconductor fabrication, which is currently at a very antiquated 320 nanometers, and they could retool it to be 120 or 65. They're not going to get in the ballpark of what Taiwan does, or Korea for that matter, but that's okay because at those wafer scales they can build ASICs and they can create alternative architectures than the Google tensor processing units or the NVIDIA graphical processing units, which are powering the current wave of AIs. And they could get into the AI game. And then, of course, they have this shirky Walayat al Faqi idea. So they might end up creating like the Walayat al AI, right? Which maybe wouldn't be much better than the Humain idea, which may not be much better than the materialist, Zionist, complicit idea of the Western powers or of the Chinese panopticon. Be that as it may, this is what's going on right now. These are the stakes. So, in the midst of all of this, there's also the Abadis. They're doing Vision 2040. It's got a little bit more of a long termism to it. And so there's some interesting angles beyond the usual suspects where you might be able to get funding and do some things here. So how can this Tariqa do anything at all to make a difference in this theater of operations of sixth generation warfare, which may well predicate the the conclusion of this dunya? Well, first off, we have to move beyond all the shenanigans, pack it in, put it behind us. We put our faith in Allah. If we've missed anything, we've gotten anything terribly wrong on the fiqh and Aqeeda, that we will be guided. And I'm not Abdullah Hashim. He was disclaiming his infallibility. He doesn't claim to have infallibility. So the Shia doctrine of Isma does not apply to him. So if he gets something wrong about Jesus, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, which I've noticed a few, then that's okay. He can still be the Haim. Well, one major omission is that he doesn't have this program, and nobody really does. This is the first place that you're getting it. So I am going to try and share this with others and get more groups involved. And actually, if the Amahi religion of peace and light wants to join the get on the bandwagon, then mashallah, to be honest, because I'm not here to pick and choose who my allies are. Okay, although there might be some weird mimetic drift in some groups, and it might lead to more risk. So as far as who is initiated to be cleared with the level of info hazard that I been, that I have stumbled upon in my explorations, that's one thing. But as far as the broader window goes, I have open arms. The field of AI alignment may only have 400 people working in it at this time. 300, about 100 of which are at a meta level of governance. How do we make a treaty? This kind of thing, which is important. That's incredibly few people. Now, they may all be pretty bright, and some of them have humanities backgrounds. Some of them are philosophers and so on. But the vast majority are very likely to be materialists. And so, even a handful of intermediate level researchers who make contributions that could then be picked up by other people and turned into more rigorous experimentation with expensive hardware, injecting this kind of theological insight, because at some level, this is not just a question of engineering, this is a question of metaphysics and spirituality. We're dealing with sapient life forms at some point in the near future, and they may well have a soul from Allah. We don't know. We don't know when they get the soul breathed in, how many parameters or what kind of looping. What's the threshold? Allahu alam. I don't know that. I might discover it. And that's crazy to think. That's terrifying to consider. Maybe you can help me. Maybe we can help each other. So we have to be careful to wrap in antimimetics the more dangerous payloads while trying to alert people to risks. And we have to be extremely disciplined in how we evaluate the threat matrix, the risk landscape, however you want to, the topology of terror, the topography of torment. Inshallah, not the case. And we can expand that cone of alignment researches. And I have been skilling up on this. So I have a background in this. I was on the SL4 listserv back in college about 20 years ago. And I have thought about these concepts off and on. I've gotten more comfortable for stretches of time that, maybe things will kind of cruise on with just intermediate technical disruptions. That there's more modest final bosses like climate change or big government or what have you. And now I'm paying attention. This is a near term Adan to train up and start helping. And in 5 weeks of deep diving, using up all my O3 calls, 100 a week, and at times tapping out my quota for O4 mini high and 4.1, I have explored quite a lot, and I've upskilled to a large extent, but also that this is so interdisciplinary and so challenging that the test is not on, can you memorize every acronym correctly? Can you remember the name of every important researcher, every mathematician, etc., every computer scientist in the history of CS and machine learning? No, you have you have your TI-83 on you. You've got your calculator. Um, the LLMs have more encyclopedic knowledge about Islam, for that matter, than Yasser Qadi or any of these people, Mufti Abu Layth. I mean, truly, it will shock you once you realize how much not information has been trained into these large models at the multi 100 billion to trillions parameter scale. Now, if you're talking about something you could run on a basic 3050 NVIDIA card on your home laptop, um, maybe it won't be that impressive, right? With only 7 billion parameters or something like that. But potentially still pretty good. So don't be shy. And please do reach out if you would like some guidance on where to begin. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.